So it gives me great pleasure to introduce my colleagues, Professor Sridhar Iyer and Sahana Murthy. In fact, both of them, of course, many of us know them, but I must mention that both of them also come into the field of education with another kind of training. So, Professor Sahana Murthy, I think her training was in physics, right, earlier, and therefore she brings that experience of physics and the insights in physics with her when she comes into education. And Professor Sridhar Iyer comes from the Department of Computer Science. In fact, he has important contributions like she has in physics, he has important contributions in networking, and he has, of course, also been contributing to the domain of education now. I'm particularly happy to be introducing both of them this afternoon because I had the privilege of being associated with the educational technology. That time it was an interdisciplinary program, and now, of course, it's become a center. So the whole, you see, while all of us are engaged in education in some way, it's very nice to see how education is looked at systematically in the work that both of them do. And in particular, one would like to commend the fact that they've built the system where they've looked at the research aspect, the development aspect, and also the outreach aspect in the form of learner-centric MOOCs. So without taking more time, I'll request them to present their work.
Okay, thanks Professor Gadre for that introduction, and thanks to IRCC and the Institute for considering this, considering our work for the award. So like Professor Gadre said, this is one of the departmental projects where research, development, outreach, all three sort of intertwine into each other explicitly, even though this is there in many other work also. So this work is really a joint effort by a number of people. The people at the top, so Jayakrishnan used to be a PhD student. He is now a senior research scientist at IIT Madras, and a lot of this work was part of his thesis. Samir was a research scientist. He's a professor of practice in IIT Gandhinagar. Vinita was a postdoc. She is now at Tata ClassEdge, and a number of other people who at that time were PhD students and postdocs. So just to set the context, this work has the word MOOCs, which is massive open online courses, and just in case it's not familiar, I think it is familiar to a large part of the audience, but MOOCs are online courses. Their goal is to provide access to information and courses anytime, anywhere for learners. There are technology platforms to support learning at scale. And what the instructors do there is provide content in the form of slides and videos and also assignments and quizzes. Learners access the content, they do the assessments, and they interact in discussion forums, right? There are many such existing platforms, and I think recently this is very familiar in the institute because there have been discussions with Dean EO office regarding that. Okay, so the problems and challenges in typical MOOCs. So MOOCs have been around for more than a decade, I would say about 15 years or so, and some of the common known problems are that there's low student engagement. You may have thousands and thousands of people register for a MOOC, and you hardly see anybody downloading the work, interacting in discussion forums and so on. So very low completion rates. I'll come to the numbers towards the end, and when I say low, it could be 5%, that low. Sometimes if 10% used to be considered as a good completion rate. And this is worsened due to distance, scale, diversity, and those. So there is a notion here called transactional distance, that it's not just that the learners are somewhere else and the teacher is here, but there is a distance, there's a psychological distance, there's a communication gap between the teacher and the learners, also between learners and learners. So this theory has been around since the 1970s for distance education, and it's very prominent here. So any problems that you see even during standard low scale online courses is amplified here. And in research also, like empirical research also, there are other challenges mentioned called the funnel of participation. So they use the metaphor of the funnel that if you look at the various stages of the MOOC, right from awareness that such a course exists, to registration, to looking at the activities and lectures all the way to completing the exams and then getting the certification, there is a huge attrition, okay, very large attrition. The other problem that has been highlighted a lot is that there's a lack of good instructional design principles as well as implementation. So what typically used to happen and still happens to a large extent is that a classroom lecture, just a lecture is videotaped, the video is put up, some multiple choice questions are given, and pretty much that's about it. There is a discussion forum in the technology platform. Okay, so this really doesn't afford good learning or good teaching. So there's a big gap there. And then also one reason for the gap is that while there is a lot of research on pedagogy and education and teaching and learning, it hasn't translated much into the MOOC space. So all this had been discussed. So the takeaway is also that there is a lot of discussion about MOOCs, but it's either about the technological issues or a lot about certification issues. You know, how many credits should it be considered for an IIT degree or other degrees and so on, and not so much on learning and the learner. So the requirement, is that it's not really enough to focus on the technology features. We saw this a lot during COVID also. And it's not effective to mimic a typical standard classroom where usually there's a lecturer and there's assignments. So what we need is to incorporate learner-centric approaches where their different needs are taken into consideration, to check whether actually they're engaged and so on, using the technology affordances. So our work came from this motivation, and it's called the learner-centric MOOC or the LCM model. What it does is, it guides instructors through the process of conceptualizing, creating and conducting a MOOC. So through the entire design process, while maintaining at its core a learner-centric approach. And it has several components, actually 5 components, the 4 quadrants here and the thing in the center. And I'll go through each of these. And these are based on theories of learning as well as several empirical studies. So most of this is in our website. I can show it towards the end, called lcm-model.org. Okay, so specifically what it does for instructors is it provides a set of design guidelines if you want to create your own course. And it provides what we call as activity constructors. So if you want to design a learning dialogue, the activity constructor can be downloaded. It's like a worksheet plus links plus some examples plus prompts and so on, which tells you what to do, how to do it, where to insert a reflection spot in a video, for example, and so on. It also provides a list of recommended actions during the actual implementation of the MOOC. That's what is meant by the orchestration. And there's more recently, we've come up with a self-check tool called the MOOC evaluation framework tool, where an instructor can go and check whether their MOOC is, to what extent it is learner-centric. So this has a list of questions you can select, and some score comes up. So let's look into the components of the model itself. So the first one is called learning dialogue, and loosely speaking, you can think of this as the content. So the goal of the learning dialogue is concept acquisition by learners. It is also a place for learners to do micro application or reflect on what information they get at that moment. So operationally, it could turn out to be a video with a very carefully placed reflection spot, and the model guides the instructor on where to place it, what kind of questions to ask, what to do after the reflection spot question, and so on. These are the dynamics. The instructor creates the reflection spots. It has to be sitting between 2 pieces of content. The learner accesses it, and the model tells what should come here, what should come here, how do you identify reflection spots in various topics and so on. Learning by doing is the second component. This is something pretty familiar, I think, for those of us who use Moodle. So I'll just very quickly do it. This is related to the activities and feedback. In the LCM model, the learning by doing activities are ungraded, and this is important later when I show you some data. So this could be an assignment, it could be a short multiple choice question, it could be something longer, and the idea is that there is immediate customized and constructive feedback provided using the technology features. Okay, so I'll spend some time on the third component called learning experience interaction. This is a little bit more interesting. One big problem with MOOCs or any online courses is the discussion forum. So there's firstly a lack of participation. Secondly, even if there is participation, it can be very trivial. You know, I agree. When is something going to happen? Third problem is it's very scattered. You know, there is no coherence. And there is no real learning, there is no real peer interaction happening in discussion forums. So we are all very familiar with it. So this LXI, the goal of this LXI is to address some of these challenges. And what happens in the LXI is that the instructor poses a focus question to kick off a post in a discussion forum. To give you a very straightforward example, the first question in a course, often we say introduce yourself. Okay, that is not a great focus question. A focus question really has to prompt the learner to do something, and I'll give you one example here. Actually, I'll come to this in a moment. So instead of simply saying introduce yourself, we ask a question like, what is your intention, what is your goal of taking this course? Something, it's very similar to an introduction, but there is a reason behind it, and every learner has to respond to this focus question. The second part of the LXI prompts learners to go and read at least 5 other responses and comment. Okay, so this is also structured, they have to do that. In the third part, there is a reflection quiz. So there is a short quiz which could ask them saying, what was the most common difficulty that you saw in the post that you read? Or what aspect of the other person's post also holds in your setting? Learners have to respond to this. These are all really quick. And the way grading is done here, anything that has the word quiz is graded. This is actually graded based on whether the learner does it or not. Nobody is actually checking what they wrote. But the fact that they have to read it, take the quiz, and answer a question with a low barrier, but still something where they have to apply their mind, that is where 2 things happen. One is the scatter gets reduced, and secondly, a lot of people do participate and go beyond the trivial questions. So this example is from a course that's actually running right now this semester. It's from one of the IIT Madras online BS program courses. It's taught by one of our alums, Dr. Prajesh Prasad, and you're also an instructor. Sridhar is an instructor there. And this is a list of LXIs that have happened in September and October. And this course has about 300 learners. So it's not a massive course, but you see the number of posts, 427 posts just in this one thread, and so on. Okay, the fourth component is what's called learning extension trajectories. This is sort of like that additional resources we give, but we know nobody looks at it. Or sometimes we just give it, we don't know who it is for. So the word trajectories actually tells us that we have to cater to the diversity in our learner population. So let's say I have a topic and I have some learners who don't have the requisite prior knowledge, and some who really know a lot about it, and some who know something but they're interested in an application. So as an instructor, I can have 3 sets of resources, additional resources. There could be a combination of websites, documents, videos, activities. It could be curated. But I tag each of them saying, if you don't understand this concept well, go to this trajectory. If you want to see an application in that sense, go to that trajectory. And then there is a simulation quiz at the end. Okay? So these are the 4 quadrant components, and the 5th one is orchestration. It's sitting at the center, because any good online course is not just about the design of the activities, it's also about what the instructor and instructor team does during the conduction of the course. So orchestration refers to sort of shepherding, gently facilitating the learners through the variety of resources available, through the deliverables, the deadlines. This actually is required because MOOCs are often very flexible. Learners get lost. Sometimes they lose track. Sometimes, they sort of lose motivation. So what the instructor team has to do is to create course management protocols, use analytics to see what's happening, what sort of learner actions are being generated, and then dynamically do some minor course correction. For example, let's say, this is a very trivial example, but it actually fits into this, this model. Let's say there is a assignment, deadline is Monday morning, so maybe on Friday or Saturday, the instructor sends an email and then sees that a lot of people may not have accessed it at all, and then there are some discussion forum posts saying, here's a problem. So change the deadline a little bit, give some extra help if required, and so on. This was a trivial example, but the orchestration has to happen throughout the 4-week or 8-week or 12-week MOOC that's happening. So the instructor team cannot just sit back saying, I've created my videos, put it up. This is where the TAs really help. This is where the NPTEL team here also is required, because the people in the studio or the people managing the technology also have some role to play here. Okay, so effectiveness. So this was done over several years. There are actually many studies here. I've just highlighted some of them. I was talking about completion rates, right? Typical MOOCs are in the range of 5 to 15%. LCM based MOOCs across 15 courses as of about a year and a half ago had a completion rate of 36%, which is not great. 36% completion is still 1/3, but it was pushing the bar. If we look at something called the mean persistence rate, now we are getting into better territory. What happens in a MOOC is that you may have 100 learners enroll, register, and only 80 of them actually access even one single thing. People register and then just disappear. So there is a term called active learners or active participants, which is a number of people who download a video or do an activity or just do one thing of substance in the course. So in the denominator, instead of all the registered participants, if you look at the number of active learners, then that's what's called the persistence rate. So the people, so 60% of the active learners pass the course in the LCM based MOOC. So this persistence rate is a fairly known thing in online learning. Ungraded activities like the learning by doing, what we did in one other study is look at the ratio of participants doing the graded versus ungraded in that course. So we did this over, I think, 6 courses or so. We looked at the range, and the ratio was sometimes the ungraded activities was 60% of the 0.64 times the graded, but sometimes there was a larger ratio of people, more than one, doing the ungraded compared to the graded. Okay? So the learning by doing had higher numbers overall. This is kind of something we were very thrilled with about the engagement in the discussion forums. So this was one course. There were about 1,700 participants and total of about 30,000 posts over 8 weeks. This was actually a course on pedagogy using technology. So large number of the people who had enrolled were teachers, and some were also people in the e-learning industry and so on. Another study done in this paper was, how many, they classified the topics, how many, there was a whole framework, were they trivial, were they about reasoning, were they creating level, and so on, and they found that 70% of the posts were beyond superficial and so on. So coming to impact, kind of scaling, outreach, impact and all. So this was some core research work that I told you so far, and in addition to our own papers and citations and all, we have found that in the last 2 years, there's a lot of other groups, mostly college teachers and people trying to do research in technology for education in India, who've used and built upon the LCM model. So recently I found about 20 odd papers where none of us are authors, none of our students, known students, are authors and so on. So it's kind of being used as a fundamental starting point for future work, especially in India. That's what we were really thrilled about. LCM model currently has been deployed in about 25 MOOCs, lots of offerings, different platforms, totally about 1 lakh learners. The design or the model, various parts of the model have been slightly adapted and used in courses at different subjects, from science and technology subjects, teacher training subjects, management, design and all, also in some corporate training. And there were some other awards that came. This was the edX prize to this course taught by Dr. Samir Sasibudhe. It made it in the top list of top 10 edX courses in 2019. Afsar Award is a Department of Science and Technology writing award. So Vinita Shah got that award in 2021, I think. Within IIT, there are two courses which were based on this. Online teaching is something you all may be familiar with. When COVID hit in 2020, director asked our department to come up with some help. Within 2 weeks, we had to produce this. Luckily, we had some 7 years of experience by then. This got made. This got about 18,000 hits in 2 months, because all over the country it was being used, and today about 30,000 hits are being seen. This Gender in the Workplace course is a mandatory course for all students in the institute, and there is also an employee version. The content is of course different, but the format of this course draws from some of the LCM elements. And I'll end with the community and the capacity development around the country, especially our Samir, JK, and some of our other PhD students who have gone out. They are building communities in engineering colleges, in other colleges in the country, and now there's like second, third, and fourth generation of people who are trained in LCM to make MOOCs. So it's being used in SWAYAM in various courses. 25 faculty have been identified as leaders, so they are actually doing research on this, and there's entire communities. So it's actually propagating even as as of today. So that's something. What we are happy with is it's kind of gone out and propagating on its own. So I think I'll pause here if there's any